Thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as the reservoir of the would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. In its planetary expansion, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Swami Prabhupada. The Mahatattva is the via medium between the pure spirit and the material existence. It is the injunction of matter and spirit wherefrom the false ego of the living entity is generated. All living entities are differentiated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Under the presence of false ego, the conditioned soul, although parts and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, claims to be the enjoyer of the material nature. This false ego is the binding force of material existence. The Lord again and again gives a chance to the bewildered conditioned souls to get free from this false ego. And that is why the material creation takes place at intervals. He gives the conditioned souls all facilities for rectifying the activities of the false ego. But He does not interfere with their small independence as parts and parcels of the Lord. So, with the permission and the blessings of the Vaishnavas and the seniors here, I request, I'm not qualified to speak, but I request your blessings to say something and share something about this verse and this class today. And someone told me that the verse that you're supposed to speak on is the one you need to hear the most, so I'm talking to myself when speaking. So a lot of you are coming here to the temple and come to Krishna consciousness, and I'm going to share a little bit about the false ego and just share about how the false ego is actually much more deeper than we think it is, and how we can get rid of this so-called root of our suffering, and like Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. Now, for a lot of us, our spiritual life started with a doubt. We had a doubt in our material life, and that's essentially when our spiritual life began. And at some point, we were convinced that okay, there's more to life than this material things that we're doing. I can use my example. And I was working long hours. I had a nice job, had a nice car, had a nice house, and I remember working really hard to get a degree. Actually, we worked out to get that degree, I had to sit around 100 exams. And still to this day, when it's around about May, June time, when it's exam season, sometimes I wake up thinking I have an exam, and then I'm like relieved. But the other day on my bookshelf, I saw this book, and it said, "The Final Exam, Death." So when you come to Krishna consciousness, actually the exams get harder, But yeah, for many of us coming into Krishna consciousness, we had a doubt in our material life. But actually, when we look at, the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And when you look at it in the opposite way, our material life started with a conviction. So from when we're spiritual entities, our material life started with a conviction that I want to enjoy separately from Krishna. So our material life begins at that stage, and our spiritual life on this planet begins with that doubt. And for us to want to enjoy separately from Krishna, we have to be really convinced, that I want to move away. And when we look at coming down from from the spiritual world to the material world, actually, you can see anytime you come down somewhere, it's easier than it is when you're going up somewhere, naturally. And we hear in the Bhagavad Gita, Mamaivam sajiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastrana indriyani prakritishtani karshati. So we hear from the Bhagavad Gita, actually, the living entity, the conditioned soul, living in this conditioned world, is actually parts and parcel of Krishna, but due to the condition of life, they're actually struggling, and in the translation, it's very hard. They're struggling really hard. So like that, in our material life, for us to go back up, it's a struggle. I remember hearing once that the class was just giving an example. Actually, when we're going up the stages of devotional service, is sometimes described like coming up a mountain. But not just coming up a mountain, but coming up a mountain with a rucksack, and with that rucksack's got rocks in it. And so sometimes it's like that, our situation. We're like struggling up to go up that mountain. But thankfully, we've come to Krishna consciousness. And when you come to Krishna consciousness, that backpack, instead of rocks, you have Bhagavad Gitas or Bhagavatam sets. And the more you distribute them, the lighter that load becomes, the easier it becomes to get up that mountain. And Krishna gives us free will. So in this verse, it says here, like, Krishna gives us constant chances. Constantly, He's giving us chances to come back to Him. And you'll find, actually, when you're in a spiritual setting, Krishna will be very personal with you. He'll constantly try and teach you lessons for us to come back to Him. Personally, I would say, anytime I was going through a phase in my life, anytime I would do something wrong, I'd get a parking fine, or I'd get like a ticket, and I was like, oh my God, like Krishna's, punishing me for something. It was really interesting, and we can find that in our lives when you have a personal relationship with Krishna, He'll intervene. And essentially, this is why Krishna we wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. So we wanted to be the enjoyer, and that's why actually the material world is created for us to have that enjoyment. And this doubt of a material life, it hasn't just come from this lifetime. Actually, probably it's come from many lifetimes. We hear in the Gita, Abrahma bhuvanaloka punaravantina arjuna mama piyantu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. So from the planets of Brahma all the way down to the lowest planets, it's a place of birth and death. It's a place of misery. And so therefore, we're very fortunate to come into contact with Krishna consciousness after many, many births and many lifetimes, and going through the different planets. So that comes to the question then, what is Krishna consciousness? What is Krishna consciousness? So Prabhupada, in a lecture with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's disappearance, he describes and gives a definition of, in essence, what is Krishna consciousness? Would you like me to share what is Krishna consciousness? Yeah? So Prabhupada explains that Krishna consciousness is feeling for the sufferings of others. Essentially, that's what Krishna consciousness is. When we feel the suffering of others, that's Krishna consciousness. And devotees are always willing to take on difficulties for the pleasure of others. We had one person come into one of our retreats we did like last year at the Mana, and she was explaining to somebody else, so she started coming, and been coming for about a year now, and she was explaining to somebody else new and saying like why she likes coming here. And she was saying, I just love coming here because everyone's so willing to do stuff for you. Everyone's willing to serve. Everyone's just willing to serve each other. So devotees are amazing in that way. And I guess as we go on the lecture, we'll unpack how, how that false ego can creep in, even within that. But devotees take a lot of austerities. Essentially, that's what I said, Krishna consciousness is feeling the suffering from others. And we hear from the Gita, Ye yatamam prapatyante, tas tam satatvam bhajamyaham, mama vartamana vartante, manushya partha sarvasa. So all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So the more we take shelter in Krishna, is the more Krishna gives us shelter. And the more Krishna gives us shelter, the more we can give shelter to others. Right? The idea is feeling for the suffering of others. And for us to do that, we have to seek shelter for Krishna. And He gives us that shelter. And then we can give it to others. Prabhupada explains that taking responsibility for Krishna, for Krishna's pleasure, is actually the greatest reality. And that's how we enter the greatest reality, is when we take responsibility for Krishna. And the more Krishna consciousness you become, the more responsibility you take. And the more responsibility you take, the more Krishna conscious you become. I remember once my uncle, he was a devotee. And when I was growing up, whenever we used to see him, we used to say, "Oh my God, it's my crazy Hare Krishna uncle." And now, when my nieces and nephews see me, they say, "Oh my God, it's my crazy Hare Krishna uncle." So somehow, we've managed to take on responsibility, and we can see, like, when you take on more responsibility, you're moving in that direction of being more Krishna conscious. But we can see actually, and we hear from this verse how the false ego manifests. Krishna says, everything is emanating from me, both material and spiritual. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, matva sarvam pravantante, iti mam bhajante mam, buddhabhava samvanvitaha. Krishna says He's the source of everything. Everything emanates from Him. But the wise who know this engage in my devotional service with all their hearts. So that second part is giving us the formula of how we can become free from the material existence. And essentially the root cause of our suffering is the false ego. That's actually the root cause. And what is the false ego? False ego is, I'm the proprietor, I'm the enjoyer, I am, it's all about me. But really, the nature of the soul is Jivara Sarupahoy, Krishna Nityadas. That's actually the real nature of the soul, and that's what covers our false ego. Actually, we move from, thinking I am the enjoyer, but actually, we're in ahamameti. We think it's supposed to be about us. So, Hare Krishna, would you like to give the class? So it's described, ahamameti, everything is emanating. We think of I and mine, but actually the reality is Bhoktaram yajatapasan sarvaloka maheshwaram sakradam sarvabhutanam jnanamam shantim rachati. The sages knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices, the Supreme Lord of all planets, and the well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So this is the real true peace formula, and how we can apply that to our daily life. So Krishna is the proprietor of everything. Krishna is the enjoyer. Krishna is our friend. Krishna is our well-wisher. There was a play at the manor on the 50th anniversary. I don't know, was anyone there? Did anyone see that play? It was really nicely done by Pandav Sena. And the play was called Krishna is Our Only Shelter. It was amazing. My godbrother Mukunda Prasad, he was playing Prabhupada, and he actually, halfway through the play, he actually shaved his head. So it was amazing dedication. But in that play, they were constantly repeating this verse, this term, Krishna is our only shelter. And yeah, we hear Ishwar Sarvabhutanam Hriday Arjuna Drishtati Brahmanyam Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudrani Mayaya. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart. And the living, wandering entities are, in everyone. He's sitting in everyone's heart. And actually, Krishna is waiting for us to turn to Him. But what's stopping us to turn to Him? Ahankar, the false ego. I was listening to Prabhupada this morning, and he was describing that bhakti is described like a seed. And when we associate with devotees, and that seed awakens. And through sadhana, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, we water that seed, and that seed grows. We have satsang, we have association. But with that seed, you get many weeds. Many weeds grow: lust, anger, greed, false pride. Simultaneously, all of these things grow as much as. So we're trying to cultivate this plant, this seed, from a creeper to a plant, so we can give shelter to others. But just like when we're gardening, yesterday I was with our gardener, and I don't know if you know, like when you have the slabs together, and then in between the slabs, like the grass grows, like weed grows in between. And I was trying to pluck the grass out, and I was like, "Look, you've missed these points, because we paid him to like fill the slabs." And he's like, "No, like don't pull them out." I was like, "Why?" He goes, "Because otherwise we won't know where the weeds are. We have to apply weed killer to this specific part." And he was explaining, like, if I just pull it out, then actually you don't get to the root, and the weed keeps coming back. And it's the same, like if we don't pluck out that weed, if we don't pluck it out at the root, it's just going to keep growing back. We hear about the false ego. Prakriti kriya manani guna karmani sarvasa ahankar vidotmatma kartanam iti manyate. The spirit soul is bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks he's the doer. And we've been given that weed killer. We've been given that weed killer by like Lord Chaitanya. And what is that weed killer? It's humility. When we have humility, when we chant with humility, that's the way out. That's the way we can remove that weed killer. Maybe somebody, you guys can, I'm just going to do a bit of a call and response now, and you guys can repeat after me. Is that okay? Okay. Trinadapi sunichena taroravi sahishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari Trinadapi sunichena taroravi sahishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari Trinadapi sunichena taroravi sahishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So I thought I'd add in just a little song break, like they do in the movies. So yeah, one who thinks of himself as more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, expecting no personal honor, yet always prepared to give respect to others. And we can very easily chant the holy names of the Lord. And unless we chant in this mood of Trinadapi Sunichena, unless we chant in this mood, we can't really enjoy the real depth of chanting. We can't cut the weed. Yes, we can cut the weed with 4 regulative principles. We can cut the weed with sadhana. We can cut the weed with knowledge. We can cut the weed by being a brahmachari, or we can cut the weed by being an amazing preacher, or a book distributor, or the best bridge preacher. But unless we tackle the false ego and we go to the weed, it's going to keep coming back. And no matter how successful we become in our service and what we achieve, unless we see ourselves as instruments of Krishna and instruments of the previous acharyas, we're going to be in false ego. Last week, we were doing a course called Life Hacks from the Bhagavad Gita. And it was with Keshav Maharaj. And my service is to basically collect the questions and ask him the questions at the end. And this one was about letting go. So letting go of, material life and looking ahead in the past. And so occasionally when I do this service, I'll always try and give Maharaj a curveball question, because he's so good at answering questions. He's so all his answers are quite viral and he's so on point. So I thought, let me try and give him a curveball question right at the end. So I said to Maharaj, what are you finding hard to let go of? What's the hardest thing that you find? And his answer was quite nice, actually. It's quite telling. And he was explaining how, the idea of being a Swami and having so much praise and accolade and being rewarded for so much, but becoming distant from the identity and understanding that he's a spirit soul and he's a servant of Krishna. He was saying that can be one of the most biggest challenges. So it's quite telling, actually. Even if you reach, that point, even if you become S.B. Keshava Swami, #wisdom that breathes. Even if you become that, you're still going to have difficulty struggling with that identification. I mean, what to speak of us, We hear from the Bhagavatam, Rishabdev, he was giving instructions to Bharat Maharaj and avoiding the false ego and the importance of Ahamameti. And Bharat Maharaj ruled his kingdom so well. He was ruling all the subjects in terms of Krishna consciousness. And Bharat Maharaj was in Bhava. Anybody here in Bhava? Maybe some of you. And he left this kingdom to set an example of, to show, actually what is detachment. And we hear the story of, he connected with a deer, and he connected with a deer in philanthropy. Keshav Maharaj is giving that example of where the term doe-eyed comes from, doe-eyed. And I'll give you a little secret of body language. If you can also tell me Bambi eyes. There's a cartoon Bambi. So if you see someone and they're speaking to you, and they're looking at you with Bambi eyes, there's a lot of affection there for you. They're infatuated by you, or there's a lot of affiliation for you. So brahmacharis, if a Mataji gives you Bambi eyes, run. just kidding. But you can see that the Bharat Maharaj, he thought of the deer. He saw the deer who was looking at him with affection. And he cared for the mind and the body, but he didn't connect with the soul. He forgot to care for that person's soul. Now, false ego, when we talk about false ego, the most grotesque form of false ego is I am better than you. That's actually the most grotesque form of false ego. But actually, we can have also false ego in the mode of goodness, thinking that I am doing something and I am doing something really good. And even though I'm doing something really good, I am doing it. We can see previous kings like Yudhishthira Maharaj, Bharat Maharaj, Lord Ram, even the way they would look after their subjects would be in relation to Krishna. And the degree we're absorbed in Krishna, the less the false ego becomes. And when we take the service mixed in the modes, right? When we take that service and we take away Krishna, it actually just becomes philanthropy. recently we were at this festival, this preaching festival, and it was like, everyone's into yoga and meditation, and you could say like everyone was ripe. Actually, devotees have a nice terminology of looking at things. It's like, you're not this body, you're not Indian, you're not from North London, from a pious family. You're actually a low-hanging fruit, and you should join the ashram. So sometimes we look at people in that way. But anyway, so everyone was, ready. And one of the devotees was preaching and giving out books. And she spent like 45 minutes with someone, And she was speaking to them for a while. And then after interaction finished, I was like, wow, like 45 minutes. Like, are they going to join the ashram? She said, no. Are they going to join Be a Monk Challenge? No. Did they take a book? Did they join the course? No. It's like, what did you talk about then? And they were just saying, they were going through some trouble, some trauma, and they were sharing about their life, and I was sharing about my life, and how Krishna helped me, and actually the devotee was reflecting, like, what happened, like, why did that person not connect, They were having their own reflection. And actually, like, when we're speaking to someone, when we're preaching, or when we're in any service, our meditation should always be like, how can I connect them to Krishna? Yes, there's all these other things, there's all these other points, but always we're thinking, what's the next step for them? I love Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he was at the Manor a couple of years ago, I think, and he was showing a video from Wales. I think it was in Wales, and maybe Cardiff, and he was showing how, like, this person was outside work, and then they were taking a book, and they didn't have any money. So Vaisheshika was trying, and then he had a lighter, and then he convinced that person to give him a lighter, right? And then he used it for his puja the next day, and he was giving that example. So when we're doing that service, having that mood of what is that, having Krishna in that center, and what is that next step for that person? How can I connect them one step closer to Krishna? Even Keshav Maharaj was giving an example of a story in a brahmachari ashram when a senior devotee was, and him and a senior devotee were trying to convince someone to join the ashram, and the senior devotee was like, no, like, this person's kacha, he's not ready. So sometimes, we don't know, like, we have to understand what is the next step for that person, and how do we take them one more step closer to Krishna. I was with Chandramuli Swami once, and we were walking from a kirtan from his flat to the kirtan, and there was a festival, and there was lots of people there. And I saw this, like, this person who was new, and from a foreign land, and he just come to the festival, and you could tell, like, he was very emotional, and he was feeling a lot of love, and he wanted to share. And I was thinking, wow, this guy's ready, this guy's like, solid, like, what's the opposite to kacha? Pakka. Then this guy's pakka, and Maharaj approached him, or he approached Maharaj, and there's a bit of an audience there. And you could tell, like, he wanted to speak and wanted to share. And Maharaj spoke to him for like 2 minutes, like literally 2 minutes, actually even less, maybe like 30 seconds, and said Hare Krishna. And then we started walking off again. And I was thinking, what? Like, I thought, this guy's ready. Shri Shri Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki. Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki. So I was thinking that this person's ready, and then once we walked away, I asked Maharaj. I was like, Maharaj, like, what happened? Like, this guy seems so ready to, and I thought, you were going to share something with him, and he was going to be transformed, and Maharaj goes, he wasn't ready to hear. He actually wasn't ready to hear. And I was like, wow, like, Maharaj detected that, He understood that for this person, the next step wasn't for him to speak, and he wasn't ready to hear. And in the same instance, not same instance, same trip, we were on the train. We were coming back, and we were sitting separately, and we were in a group. And one lady came up to us, one Mataji, and said, "Oh, there's someone on the train who really wants to hear about Krishna consciousness. And Maharaj, can you come and speak to her? Or can you guys come and speak to her?" And it was like late. It was a late train, and Maharaj had given a class that morning. It was, he'd spoken to lots of people. He actually had a lot of things to do on the train. Left. It's quite hard being a sannyasi. And I was like, no, Maharaj, like I'll go. Like don't worry. Like I'll assess the situation and stuff. And Maharaj goes. And I said to Maharaj, like, don't worry, you've got so much to do. You've got lots of things happening, like lots of your personal stuff to do. Maharaj goes, for preaching, I'll drop anything. I'll drop everything for preaching. So actually, when we put Krishna in the center, we understand the importance, the value of how preaching is such an important part. I remember when I was doing book distribution once, and I was trying to give this book to someone, and they were ready, they were taking it. And somehow I wanted them to give £5 more, so increase my score. I was trying to get in there, be like, have a score and all of that. And then the guy was like, "No, I don't want the book at all." And I was like, "Oh man." And I was like so frustrated. And then the guy left, and I was like, "Why did this happen?" I remember speaking to my godbrother, Vamsi Dharika, when I was like, "Why did this happen?" And he was saying to me, like, actually, you became attached to the result, and he detected it, And Krishna was actually teaching you a lesson, like not to be attached. So actually, it's not about us. Actually, it's not about us. It's about actually giving that Krishna consciousness to someone. And sometimes, actually, we have to think: am I doing this for philanthropic work, or am I doing this for myself? We have so many different projects. Sometimes we feel like my project is the best project, and my service is the best service. But actually, how much are we thinking, actually, what is best for this person, and how do we give Krishna to this person? That is actually the ultimate goal. And when we put Krishna in the center, we can actually get rid of that false ego. Even when we do Food for Life, I remember when I started, I remember everyone used to say to me, "Food for Life is not philanthropic work. It's Krishna consciousness." I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. But eventually I got it, Actually, it's prasad, what we're serving. One lady, she wrote a newspaper article on Food for Life, and she did some research. And she looked at all the charities. And I said to her, "What was the difference? What did you find different about us?" And she goes, "Oh, what's amazing is that you guys actually put Krishna at the center. Like, it's about Krishna consciousness. It's not just philanthropic work." And when we come back to the Bharat Maharaj story, we can appreciate that, he left his body thinking of a deer, and he came back as a deer. And in his next life, with the grace of Krishna, he remembered what he was. And he understood the importance of association. And that's what's going to take him back. So in the next life, he associated with sadhus as a deer, and then in the next life, he actually came back as Jada Bharat. And as Jada Bharat, he, became absorbed, and he also was detached. And one of his service was to stand as a scarecrow, as in the field. I can't even stand in Janmashtami on the field for like 20 minutes when it's hot, let alone standing. But he was absorbed. And when he was asked to carry that palanquin, he saw the ant, and he wanted to protect the ant. Because he was seeing everything in relation to Krishna, Pandita Samadarshana. He was seeing that. And that's when he realized, the importance of having your sadhana, the importance of putting Krishna in the center. And the message of the story of that Bhagavatam story is actually that the root cause of our illusion, the root cause of our suffering, the root cause is the false ego. And Lord Chaitanya's taught us, actually, our real nature is das and udas and udas. And Lord Chaitanya gives that verse in relation to Varanashram. He's sharing that in relation to Varanashram also. is sharing that in terms of service. And when we have the right consciousness, when we remember that actually the real suffering of someone is the false ego. And our real service is to awaken the Krishna consciousness in someone else. That is actually the greatest welfare activity, para upakar. To awaken the person's God consciousness, to awaken their Krishna consciousness. And we are here in the Krishna consciousness movement as, soldiers of Prabhupada, and Krishna himself, Parityanam sadhunam vinashaya duskritam, he's come for this mission, and we're also on that mission. And if we can do that, if we can be part of that mission, the more we surrender to Krishna, the more Krishna can give us shelter, and the more we can give shelter to others, which is removing the suffering of others, and that's how we can go back to Godhead. Now, today is also the appearance day of Vakeshwara Pandit, and he's a close associate of Lord Chaitanya, and he used to actually he's renowned for his dancing in kirtan. He would dance for 42 hours in a stretch. We only have 24 hours Birmingham kirtan, which even stops in the evening. How many of us do 72 hours dancing non-stop? We hear about his pastimes with Devananda Pandit, and how he was instrumental in relieving Devananda Pandit. And Vakeshwara Pandit was deeply ecstatic in his dancing, and Lord Chaitanya was really pleased with him. Lord Chaitanya would sing, and they had a deep bond. And there's a nice quote I'll share, a conversation between them. Vakeshwara Pandit says, "O moon-faced one, give me 10,000 Gandharvas and let them sing while I dance, and then I will be happy." And Mahaprabhu answered, "You are one of my wings. If I had another like you, I could fly in the sky." Gandharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Any corrections, comments, bits to add, Raj, or anyone else? Questions?
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Raj Mukunda. You were talking about how we have to see who's ready for Krishna consciousness and try to meet them where they are. Can you share some from your own experiences? What signs do you look for that show that someone is ready for Krishna consciousness, and how we can tune into that and fan that spark, and how we can just be more sensitive?
Yeah, thank you. I guess when we see that person, and when we're interacting with that person, the willingness for them to hear you and accept whatever it is that you're offering as that next step. I guess part of it is, understanding that, this person is, a soul of Krishna. But when you're trying to give them Krishna consciousness, the level of resistance you receive, sometimes you can see. Sometimes there's so many layers there, and it's hard to penetrate through that layer, and they're just not ready. And sometimes you have to know, it's not about knowing how much to push, it's about knowing how much to not push, like when to let go. You can push, and you should. Like my mindset is always keep trying. Like if somebody says no to a book, I'll bring out another book or another course or something else. You're trying. But then there's a point where you realize, okay, now I gotta stop, because then you've reached that line, and then going the other way, you're actually gonna repel them from Krishna consciousness. So then you just take that little win. And that's how I see it. Like you take the small wins, even if they touch the book, even if they had a favorable experience, but at the same time, your energy is really important. Who you're giving that time to. I'm not saying that you should not give time to anyone if they're suffering, but actually like being conscious of, is this person ready, and am I the right person to give them that Krishna consciousness? Because sometimes it's not only that they might not be ready, but you also might not be the right person to give them that. There might be somebody else. Yes.
Well, if a person shows interest and they don't criticize, then you keep on telling them.
Yeah.
And then if they pass a negative remark or something, then I stop. I'm sitting in the bus and next to me sitting a man, and he said, "Why are you talking to yourself?" And I said, "No, I'm praying, I'm chanting." And I felt that he wanted, So I have a lot of malas and bags. So I said, it says on the bag, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. So I gave it to him. I said, look, you just chant like this, Hare Krishna. And then after a year, I met him here and he said, thank you for the mala. It's just 1 minute. A person shows you interest. And somebody else might just say, move away from you. So they show interest, isn't it? Person who's interested in devotion.
You have to be 100. You have to give them that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My question is simple: is this false ego bad?
Is a false ego bad?
Yeah. The verse says that it's a plenary expansion of God.
Yeah. The false ego everything is emanating from Krishna, essentially, so even this material world is emanating from Krishna. We emanate from Krishna. And is it good or bad?
Yeah,
well,
how do you perceive it?
How do I perceive it? Yeah, well, we can understand that because of the false ego, it's actually the root cause of our suffering, right? So because the false ego is described as us being the enjoyer, us being the proprietor, us being what's not really our true identity. And if you're taking yourself away from your true identity, right? If you take yourself away from your natural inner identity, then it's not going to be good for you. We're suffering like in the first verse I was mentioning from the Gita, Mamaivam so jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana, right? Mana shastrana indriyani, prakritishtani karshati. So actually the conditioned soul is actually struggling really hard. And why are they struggling really hard? Is because of this identification with the false ego. So, actually, some philosophies think the false ego is good or the ego is good. But actually, the real self is the spirit soul, which is Satchitananda, which is Nitya Krishna Das. That's actually the real essence of what the soul is. But when we have the false ego, then that's a covering. That's material. That's not reality. That's actually not where we should be. It's not our right position. So if we want to become alleviated from suffering and pain, then we have to remove that false ego, which is not easy. It's actually the root cause of why we're here. So even if we're in Krishna consciousness, the hardest thing is to get rid of that false ego and always see everything in relation to Krishna. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. You mentioned earlier that Krishna allows us to material enjoyment. In terms of the false ego, in what mood do you think Krishna allows us to enjoy false ego.
Maharaj, would you like to answer that?
In terms of our false ego, in what mood do you think Krishna allows us to enjoy, or allow us material enjoyment?
So we understand that the false ego is something which is gifted by Krishna in order to allow us to enjoy separately from him. Of course, Krishna doesn't like to see the living entity. The ultimate result of false ego is that you suffer because it's a wrong identity. But we can say that even that is part of Krishna's plan, because through that frustration that one experiences through exercising their false ego, they ultimately come to their real knowledge. So even the false ego and the giving of the false ego and the facility given by Krishna for the living entity to be an illusion of its own identity, ultimately is part of Krishna's master plan to bring us back to real consciousness, real awareness. So I don't know if that helps.
Maybe add, is Krishna's mood one of like punishment, or one of out of love to bring us back to a relationship with him?
Yeah. Do you wanna?
Yeah, it's more a sense of rectification. Krishna ultimately is the best friend of every living entity, and even when Krishna sends us experience of suffering or struggle or seeming punishment, even that is part of, like a loving parent, trying to ultimately bring the child back to proper awareness. So.
Any other questions? Yeah, for Arjuna.
The creation of the universal form, and Arjuna, he says, he's fearful of all these images. He says, help me. What can I do? I see these forms come before me. Please show your form to me, he says. And then he says, to Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contamination of fruitive activities, and mental speculation, he who works for me, the Supreme Lord, by his, the goal of his life, makes him the goal of his life, who is friendly to every living being, certainly comes to me. So it's by his service that we can realize that don't worry. He's saying, don't worry. It says, like Shakespeare says, our doubts, they are traitors. They cause us to achieve that good we may achieve by trying. So this to me is we must trust in Krishna. I think, that's what I get derived from this.
Yeah. Totally agree. Trusting Krishna is it's everything. We're surrendering. The last verse in the Gita is talks about surrender, and when we surrender to Krishna and we serve Krishna, then
we just got to try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just try your best and
see what happens.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like I was saying, that the more responsibility you take for Krishna, the more Krishna consciousness you become. So if we take responsibility for Krishna, then Krishna rewards us accordingly. So. Okay, thank you so much.